Deborah Levison, thank you for coming back to the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yes, world traveler Debbie, ThrillerFest traveler. You've been all over. You've been a busy, busy person.
It's been a busy month, I have to admit. We were in Greece for a couple of weeks, which was a real bucket list trip. I've been
Yeah,
looking
that's
forward to that for years and years.
that's definitely on my bucket list. That just seems like such a cool place to go to. I know this has nothing to do with what we're going to be talking about, but hey, we're here. What was your favorite part?
Everyone's asking me that, and
Yeah.
I can't answer. We were in 5 islands,
Wow.
and I loved every island. I loved all the different villages that we went to. I guess, I mean, it's a little cliche, but sunset on Santorini
Okay.
was spectacular, just magical.
Now, did you
But
stay
every
in
every island had amazing things.
did you stay in big cities or did you try and stay off the beaten path a little bit or both?
Um, well, no, we were in smaller towns.
Mm,
Crete, I guess, was more of a bigger town,
yeah.
but we didn't even spend more than an hour in Athens.
Okay. How was
So
the food? It looked delicious.
food is great. It's
Oh,
really good.
a couple of friends of mine went on their honeymoon there years ago, and our big thing was at bar time we go get euros. We just love euros. And I said, "So you're in Greece? I would think the euros are good." He said, "They're everywhere." He said, "Oh my God, were they good?"
Everything was good. I have
Wow.
to admit, everything was absolutely perfect except for the weather. We were
Oh,
there just a tiny bit too early in the season. If we had waited maybe 3 weeks, it would have been so much better.
oh,
It
was it
was
a little
cold.
chilly?
It
Oh, okay.
was.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's fast forward here. You went from Greece to Thriller Fest. Why don't you tell
Yep.
us about that?
Also magical. It's, I think, the fourth Thriller Fest that I've been to, and
Wow.
it's just such a blast. It is such a good time, and it's so informative, and it's so great for networking and seeing friends. I just love it there.
What was the best part of it for you and why?
Well, that's hard to say because,
Okay.
it's a social event, but it's also very educational. I listen to these panels and people talk about writing craft and it's specific. So it's not stuff that I can talk to my
Mhm.
friends about at home or my family.
Right.
And it's wonderful, a whole giant ballroom of writers talking about their craft is just so much fun if you're a writer. And then you get to meet these masters. Like this year, there were these one-on-one interviews with Dennis Lehane
Oh, yeah.
and
I
Louise
interviewed Dennis.
Penny.
Yeah.
Oh, so great. And Louise Penny was interviewed.
Mm,
And you have people up there on the stage that are your writing icons and heroes. And it's
yeah.
just so much fun to hear them and to
Oh,
meet them.
yeah. You betcha. Now, this is also a reader event, if I remember correctly, correct?
Yeah, yeah. And
Wh-
readers and writers come from all over. It always shocks me how much people invest in this. There are readers from all over the states and abroad. And I think the reader of the year was from the UK.
Oh,
She
wow.
came all the way from the UK.
Dang. That sounds amazing. Now, how many days is it? It's like 4 days, 5 days, something like that?
Well, I was there for three,
Okay.
Thursday through Saturday. And but there are people who come and do different segments of it. I wasn't there for the earlier segments in the week, but it's almost a week long.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking off camera before, I hit record, and there's different like it's kind of segmented. There's like pitch fest, craft fest, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Which ones did you go to?
So I actually volunteered at Query Fest, which is
Oh,
an opportunity for writers who are either launching a new book and want a first agent or are maybe changing agents. It's a chance for them to meet one-on-one with new agents and do their quick elevator pitch and see if they can get some interest and get signed by an agent. And many people have. Um, I was volunteering there, and again, that's just it's so much fun. People are really nervous,
Oh, sure.
and everyone. I'm walking around with a water jug, filling people's glasses with water, and meanwhile, everyone's asking for whiskey and vodka instead. It's hysterical.
Oh my gosh. Did you hear any of the pitches that authors were doing?
I didn't. And
Oh,
we try to give everybody a little bit of privacy.
sure.
The agents are set up in the circumference of the room, and then they get a long line in front of them of people
Mm.
waiting to pitch. But when it's time for the individual writer to sit down with the agent, we try to give them a little bit of space so
Okay.
they can speak privately. And
Were any of them like practicing in the hallway or whatever with
oh
each other?
yeah, oh
Okay.
yeah,
That's kind of cool. Now,
yeah.
did you ever do a pitch like that?
I have not at ThrillerFest, but
Okay.
I actually was looking for a new agent earlier this year. So
Mm,
I started doing querying, which is reaching out by email in
right.
my case. So I did that through January and February, and it's brutal. It is a brutal process.
Now, how did that turn out for you?
Fabulous.
Good.
I connected with my new agent. We signed immediately, and I'm just over the moon. I'm ecstatic. I have a girl
Good.
crush on her, and
Oh, excellent.
she's just wonderful.
Now, how many rejections did you get before you like connected with the one?
So let's see, I would say over a dozen.
Okay.
And it's painful to get every rejection, but you have to keep in mind that you have to wait for the right one. And it's
Right.
better to be, I think it's better to get a rejection from someone who's sort of lukewarm about the project rather than, sign a contract with the wrong person who really isn't in your corner
Yeah, you
and
want a hell
really
yeah.
isn't that thrilled. Yeah,
You want somebody
yeah,
that's a hell yeah. It's like, of course I
absolutely.
want Debbie Levison on my team. Hell yeah. And
So,
right, that only makes sense. The only good thing I could see out of a bunch of rejections would be if they offered decent feedback. It's like, okay, you're not a right fit for us because of X, Y, or Z. Or, you know what? You're missing this piece or these pieces. Did you ever get any of that, like constructive
not at all.
criticism? Oh,
Not at
that
all.
sucks. Oh my God.
Yeah. Some of them they're very courteous, they're
Mm.
very kind in their letdown. No, they don't, I don't think they have time. They don't have time to give everyone constructive criticism. They just are flooded with queries and
So for
requests.
a Thriller Fest for I think it was called Pitch Fest,
Yeah.
um, how many authors went through that line, do you know, that pitched to all these agents?
Wow, that's a hard question.
What did it seem
Hmm.
like? Hundreds?
I can let you know there were definitely hundreds. They
Okay.
were divided into different rooms, so I was volunteering in just one out of maybe 5 or 6 rooms.
How many agents
Um,
about?
in my room, about 12.
So it's almost like Shark Tank, but
It's
but
like
with
speed dating.
yeah,
It's
there
speed
you go.
dating with agents. Yeah.
Wow. That's
And
amazing.
it's nerve-wracking.
Now, do you know instantly that this agent's like, "Hey, I really like your stuff. Let's take this to the next level."
For the people who were pitching at Pitch
Yeah.
Fest?
Hmm.
No, I think
Oh.
if that's happened, I haven't heard about it, but
Okay.
I did hear Alex Findley found his agent at Pitch Fest and then went on to sign a contract that night at the cocktail party, or
Oh,
was
wow.
offered a contract at the cocktail party. But
That
I think what typically happens is if an agent is interested, they'll ask for either a full manuscript or a few
mm,
chapters and then sort of take it from there.
okay. So for somebody who's never done any pitching, you have to have a full manuscript before you walk in.
Yeah. Yeah, for fiction, absolutely. And that's the case not just at Pitch Fest, but at querying in
Sure.
general. With fiction, you have to have a full manuscript. With nonfiction, you have a little bit more leeway. You can present a more in-depth proposal with a few sample chapters and an outline of what you're proposing, but that's not true with fiction.
Okay. So you want your bestest, most polished. manuscript possible to dazzle whoever you're trying to dazzle.
Yep, 100%.
Okay, that makes sense. So, what part of Thriller Fest? I was going to ask you what part could you have done without, but it seems like you could pick and choose, so that really isn't a consideration.
No, I love the whole thing. What can I do without? I guess the only thing I could have done without this year is putting my foot in my mouth and mixing up an author's name when I knew exactly who she was and I called her by the wrong name. I could have done without that.
You
No, the
know what?
rest was great.
That stuff happens. That's for sure. That's for sure.
Happens
So,
to me.
money. I look at Thriller Fest every year and I'm getting a lot more serious about it. And it's a reality. No matter where you are in your author journey or whatever, it's a consideration and you have to take it seriously. What were some of the costs?
So, good question. So they break it down, as you said, there are different segments: Craft Fest, Query Fest, Pitch Fest. So Thriller Fest, which is what I did, you can get a day pass for $400. You can do a Thriller Fest with the awards banquet that happens on the Saturday night. You can do that for 750. Um, you can do Craft Fest, Pitch Fest, and Thriller Fest for 1,200. So it's definitely a pricey conference.
Yeah,
And then in addition to that, you have to add the hotel, which is, New York City is a fortune. And I was pretty surprised that on top of what I paid, I was also hit with a resort fee, which I completely either didn't remember or didn't
yeah,
see on my confirmation, but that was an additional fee. And then there's transportation. And, like I said, people are coming from all over the place. So there's a flight and transfers. At least in my case, coming from Connecticut, I can just jump on the train. So that's a little bit
nice.
easier for me.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
transportation, coming from Wisconsin to, fly probably into LaGuardia. Yeah, probably about 400 bucks somewhere in that ballpark. Now,
Yeah.
hotels, did you stay at the hotel where Thriller Fest was?
I have every year in the past. This year, I actually had a credit at the Hilton down the street, so I just
Okay.
stayed there and walked up in the mornings.
I How much of a heartburn was that, or was it even? Was it much of a difference?
Not much of a difference.
Okay. Well, all those hotels are right next to each other, right?
Yeah,
They're
pretty
pretty much
much,
they're walking
pretty
distance.
much. But then there is food and drink, and that's a biggie because you want to hang out at the bar and have drinks and,
Sure.
socialize. So that adds up pretty fast.
So, how much is a beer? Like a bottle of beer, like a Miller Lite.
Well, I can tell you a glass of wine,
Okay.
with tip was like 20 bucks.
Okay. It's high, but for big city, that's about par for the course.
It is
It's
what it is. Yeah.
yeah, right, exactly. And how often do you do it? Really?
Right.
That's the way I look at. Now, hotels, I didn't look into what the prices were at the hotel that where Thriller Fest was going on. I would imagine 2 to 300 is about normal. Do you know
Hmm.
what the rates were or not?
Um, that sounds about right to me. I mean, as I said, I wasn't there on site,
Okay. All right.
but
And then like you said, resort fees, that's something new-ish that hotels are doing. It's like, where's this extra 70 bucks a day coming from? It's
yeah,
like,
exactly.
and it used to be, I mean, one of my cousins that I grew up with, he was in second in command of one of the biggest hotels in downtown Chicago on Michigan Avenue. And he was telling me, it's like, yeah, I'll waive the parking fee. And I'm like, parking fee? What are you talking about? Because I'd stay at his hotel all the time. And he's like, yeah, he said, we charge, I think it was like 80 bucks a night on top of whatever it is. I'm like, for a guest, you're charging them 80. He said, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's the world we're living in now. And I'm just like, oh, ouch. That's rough. That's rough. So
Hmm.
talking to other people that have gone, airfare, food, whatever else, it's a couple grand is probably per person, I think, is a good benchmark.
Right.
All right. And how friendly is it towards like did you bring your husband? Can you bring a spouse or a friend or anything like that?
A lot of people do, not to the actual writing events or
Yeah, they'd be
to
bored probably. Yeah.
they would be. I think they
Yeah.
really would be. But yeah, a lot of people bring their spouse.
Okay.
Spouse does a little sightseeing during the day and they join at night. But yeah, mine did not come. But as I said, we're an hour away. Where my
Yeah.
kids are in the city, so we spend
Oh,
plenty of
okay.
time there
Okie
normally.
dokie. Now, from reading your book, The Crate, which we will talk about, your husband got a job on Wall Street, right?
Yeah, but that lasted for a year maybe.
Oh, okay. So
The
is he
commute
still
was brutal,
how many?
brutal. From where we were, he was spending 2.5 hours each way
Oh,
commuting. That did not
ouch.
last long.
That's before there was like hybrid or working from home or any of that stuff.
Yeah,
When you went to the office, you literally had to go to the office.
yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, that would be rough on him and you and the kids.
Hmm.
That trickles down. There's no doubt about that. My dad, when we lived in Chicago, he traveled an hour each way to work by car. And he always
Well,
worked
that's
over.
significant too.
Oh yeah, and he always worked overtime.
Yeah,
So I grew up, I didn't see my dad because between the travel and the overtime, and he worked second and third shifts.
yeah.
So it's like,
And now we both work from home.
wow. Oh, really? Oh, is that cool?
Yeah. And if we ever leave the house, the dogs are like, wait, what are you doing? Where do you
Don't
think you're
abandon us,
going?
mom. Yeah, they get spoiled. That's awesome. So, as far as Thriller Fest goes, if I'm a newbie and I've never been to it before, what's like one or two things you suggest that it's a must do? You got to do it.
You have to put your shyness aside and say hello to everyone. And the
Okay.
people are super friendly. Everyone is super friendly. It can be a little daunting,
Hmm.
to go and introduce yourself to people you've admired for so many years. And it can get a little tongue-tied, but just meet as many people as you can and take in as much of the information as you can, go to all the panels, do all the socializing. Yeah.
Okay, that makes total sense to me. I've been going to 20 books to 50K in Vegas since 2017. Now it's Author Nation. It's the world's biggest indie author conference.
Wow.
And I've spoken at the last four, but this year I'm not going to. I'm going to do something different. I'm either going to try Killer Nashville. I think
Hmm.
that's on my radar. Have you ever been to that?
I have not. There's a possibility that I'm going. I have a couple of friends who have already set up a panel, including me.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
but I'm not 100% sure I can make it. I'll try, which is followed immediately by BoucherCon, both in
Yes,
Nashville.
they're
So
both in Nashville. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, those are the two I've got it narrowed down to now.
yeah. And I
There
think those are a little more affordable.
Yeah, and I haven't been to Nashville since I was a little kid because my mom loved country and western music. So we had to go see the Grand Ole Opry House, but we didn't have any money, so we literally went to the Grand Ole Opry House, took a couple of pictures, and I'm like, "Aren't we going in or seeing a show?" And they're like, "Well, we can't afford that." So so we hopped in the Buick and drove back to Chicago. I'm like, "Oh God, live a
Wow.
little bit, mom and dad. What the hell?" So yeah, I think I'll be doing that one. So are you going back to Thriller Fest next year?
Probably.
Okay.
I mean, I guess I would have to see where. I mean, I would say I would love to at this point. I don't
Okay.
see why I wouldn't.
All right. Very good. So let's talk about your writing, more specifically, your book, The Crate, a story of war, murder, and justice. And you also have A Nest of Snakes that I have not read yet, but I did read The Crate. And I I got the audio version. I love audiobooks. And I gotta say, your narrator knocked it out of the park.
Right? Isn't
Be-
she wonderful?
oh,
Cassandra Campbell. Oh,
she
love her.
really, really was. Where did you find her? Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. And I think this is unusual, right? Not every audio version comes with a set of CDs, but
No, it does not. Yeah,
you
that's
can get
amazing.
the digital download, but this is actually the whole set of,
See, that
whatever
would
it
be
is,
good
40
on
hours
the
of.
that would look good on the bookshelf. I'm gonna have to look into that because I've got my subscription to Audible, and that's where I got it. Yeah, I got it from there. But I tell you what, I was listening to it, and it's like this is a performance by an artist that AI could never do. You know,
I agree. I
I'm
agree.
not anti AI in any stretch of the imagination, but for something like this, it's just not appropriate.
So you asked where I got her from. And so
Yes, yes.
I actually had an audio deal before I had a print deal.
Oh wow,
So
that's
my
unusual.
agent did that
Yeah.
intentionally. And the audio company, Tantor Media,
Hmm.
gave me a set of auditions. I think there were three different narrators to choose from. And Cassandra's voice is just so lovely and
Yep.
pure and so different from mine that it was such an honor for me to it's narrated in first person, so I'm thinking,
Right.
oh, maybe people will think this is how I actually sound. No, she's amazing. She's won every audio award and she's in the Audio Hall of Fame and
Mm.
has done
Yeah.
some huge projects, so it was a privilege.
Yeah, like I said, it's a performance, and AI I don't think can do that kind of performance. Now, AI for like maybe nonfiction, I I think we're pretty close to where that would be palatable. But for this, like I said, it's like I don't want to go to a theater and see a bunch of robots on the screen. It's the same thing.
Right, right.
So good on her and good on you for picking her because she's fantastic. I really enjoyed it. So we'll start out with, the crate. How cool that Lee Child. I know we spoke about this last time, but it's like did a blurb for you. Was I'm trying to remember, was that a Thriller Fest that you bumped into him?
Absolutely. It was my first Thriller Fest. It was 2018. The book was just about to come out. And I had just come off a panel and was sort of standing there chatting with people. And I got a tap on my shoulder and I turned around and looked up, way up. He's very tall. And he was holding a copy of my book in his hand.
Wow.
And he said, I read the first chapter last night and I'm liking it.
Oh wow.
And, my jaw just dropped to the floor and I was like,
Yeah.
da, 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 da.
Oh, that's so cool. It just good for you. When did you find
Yeah.
out that he actually like wrote that blurb for you?
We emailed afterwards. We were
Oh, okay.
emailing and he suggested the blurb as part of a
Nice.
longer blurb. And so like that's the kind of thing that can happen as a result of Thriller Fest. So, these kinds of connections and blurbs are invaluable. And you know who else I met that year who gave me a wonderful blurb? James Rollins.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he
That's
was he was amazing. He read the book on a flight to Iceland, if I
oh,
remember
okay.
correctly. And so he had a lot of time to read. And then
Yeah.
he came back with the most like just jaw-dropping blurb. It was
Oh,
great.
oh my gosh. That's so cool. I love to hear stories like that. That's great. So your book, The Crate, can you give us a sneak peek or an outline of the book?
Yeah, of course. I think we talked about this before. It was
Yeah.
not a book I ever expected to write because, I always wanted to write a book. I was always a professional writer, but as a journalist and as a publicist, which is very different kind of writing, but I always
Right.
wanted to write a book. And I always thought that romance might be the easiest way to start.
Sure.
And I had never read true crime. It was not a genre that was particularly on my radar. And
Yeah.
I certainly never expected to write it until 2010. I got a phone call. We were already living here in the United States at the time, but I'm originally from Canada. Half my life was in Canada.
Yeah.
And it was my brother calling from Toronto to say that he had discovered a crate underneath our summer home, our lake house on a tiny lake in this beautiful, very secluded, very heavily wooded area of Ontario, a couple of hours north of Toronto. He said a wooden crate was discovered underneath our cottage. And when it was opened, it was the most grisly thing you could ever imagine. And it became a murder investigation.
Wow.
and my family was just turned upside down. The kids were pretty young at the time, and so we wanted to protect them from the violence and of the whole situation. And my husband and I were completely freaked out that
Oh yeah.
this had happened. And my brother was furious because he became the primary murder suspect in the investigation.
Jeez.
And the worst part, though, was that my parents, who were in their 80s, they were traumatized.
Oh,
To have something so horrible and so evil happen in the place that they had built themselves in the 70s by hand, with their blood and their sweat,
yeah.
and the place that they felt the safest. It was really their safe haven and their refuge. And so they were really, really traumatized by this. And people started to turn to me and say, "Well, are you going to write the story of this discovery and this investigation and the trial and the conclusion? Are you going to write the book?" And I started thinking, yeah, I'm going to write this book. And then I started writing. I started writing the whole story of the crime itself and how it impacted my family. And after a while, I realized that for readers to understand how it impacted my family, they had to know my family's story, my
Right.
backstory. So I started to tell my parents Holocaust stories, how both my parents survived the Holocaust. And it became this intertwined narrative of evil in the past meets evil in the present.
Yeah, it's almost two books, but you intertwined it very well. You did a great job of melding those two pieces together, and both of those could stand alone, those stories, I think. And it's just heartbreaking with everything that your parents endured for so long. And it's like, okay, this is a place of refuge. This is our happy place. You know, for that to be disturbed, and broken is just, it's so horrible. But,
Yeah.
you know, it's a very emotional book. It was for me. It's like I was talking before. I like to think of myself as more of a tough guy or whatever, but man, I was turning into a pile of goo listening to your narrator read this, and I'm just like, oh my God. It's like, I don't have it so bad. I have it really good. It's like, holy
Yeah,
shit.
we all do.
We do. And so one thing that really jumped out at me is you write very vividly. Like, I feel like I'm in the story. Is this intentional, and how do you do it so well?
Thank you. Um, I think so. Well, the first thing is that it's written in first person. And so that I think makes an immediate connection,
Mm,
right, with the person who's talking.
right.
But I think one of the things I did was ask a lot of questions. And when you ask the reader questions, it's engaging. You're asking them to think about the same thing that you're thinking about
Mm,
as the author, as the narrator. And so I think that is really a device that draws the reader in. I mean, I think it worked in this particular book. Um, but like in every book, you really want to flesh out that characterization by letting the reader know the thoughts of the characters. And so, if the reader knows what I'm thinking as we're sort of experiencing this whole crime, the unfolding of the investigation, the thinking back to my parents' stories, I think all of that really draws the reader in. And then I tend to be a very descriptive writer. I'm trying
you
to
are.
tone
Yes.
that down. That was my first book. It might have been pretty descriptive. I think I toned
I
it down in the second, definitely the third.
I think I
Um,
think it was perfect. I think that the amount, I was going to ask you, suggestions for authors trying to, do this, trying to get that, yeah, to write so vividly, to pull you in like that. Sometimes it's over the top and it's like wasted words, and sometimes it's not enough. How do you find that sweet spot? It's hard.
I think it comes with experience and it depends on the book and it depends on the part of the book that you're writing. I mean,
Mm,
there are times when you want plot to take over and you want the action to, sort of fly, and you don't want to stop the action and burden it with too much description.
Right.
But there are other times when you can sort of slow down and, you know, with the reader, take a look around and consider the setting. And one of the themes of the book is really how a setting is changed by violence.
Right. Right. Yeah. But you did a great
So
job with that. Kudos to you. That was awesome.
thank
And
you.
one scene that like, and probably I'm the only person that's going to say this to you, is you were talking about the paring knife for peeling for potatoes. Was that your grandma or your
My
mom?
mother.
Yeah. And my brain went immediately to my grandma and my mom with a paring knife. They could peel a spud at lightning fast.
Yeah. That's a real visual scene, right?
It is. And
I
and
remember that, the smell of the newspaper with the wet potato
yes.
peelings piling up.
Yes. My mom and my grandma would go to town with just a pot of potatoes. I mean, we're Irish. Of course there's it's not a meal unless there's it has to be potato involved. There has to be a potato related somewhere in this meal. And I remember just sitting at the kitchen table watching them do it, and I'm like, they're like lightning with those little paring knives. And I remember asking, I was like, I'd like to try it. And they're like, they both laughed. I was like, yeah, give it a try. And it's like, you're gonna cut your finger off. Stop, stop,
They
stop.
let you hold the knife? Wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You kid. Absolutely. But it didn't last long. It didn't last long. Yeah. So,
That's
you know,
funny.
and then also, it's like no scraps of food went to waste. You were talking about what your parents endured during the Holocaust, not just in the death camps, but also in these neighborhoods, beforehand.
Hmm.
They made ghettos for the Jews, and
Yes.
they were starving them out. They're depriving them of every kind of basic necessity possible.
Yes.
And, nothing went to waste. And that sticks with you. That never goes away. And, when you had nothing, you don't waste. So
Right.
how do you teach your kids that? How, like waste is bad.
How do you teach your kids that? Well, they taught me, and it's disturbing to me to see how much we waste, right? Like I
Oh,
come home from ThrillerFest and I open the fridge door and half the things need to be thrown away immediately, and it's
uh,
killing me throwing out,
yep,
whole jars of salsa and whole containers of chicken and,
yep.
half a bottle of milk that went bad. Like just it's still tough for me, but my kids didn't absorb that.
Yeah.
Maybe my daughter a little bit. The guys in the family, nah.
See, my kids, same thing. It's like I'll take care of the dishes after dinner, and I do most of the cooking now. And it just kills me when I see food on a plate. Because when I was growing up, you didn't leave until everything was gone. Both my parents were born and raised in Ireland, and it was a third world country back then, where they had no electricity and no running water. My mom tells stories about her and her sister would go to the community well in the morning and grab the water for the day.
Oh, wow.
I mean, they lived super primitive. Yeah, I asked my dad. I said, "Well, what would your mom cook for dinner?" And he said, "That's funny you mentioned that because I'd ask her, I was like, what's for dinner today, Ma?" And she's like, "Whatever you kill or catch, that's dinner."
Wow. Wow.
So it's just a totally different mindset. And my dad would eat in like 2 seconds flat. If there's food on that plate, it was gone. And
Right?
if
You remember the scene with my dad.
yeah,
Same thing.
yes, that's what triggered all this stuff for me. And it's like I remember he would buy if it was on sale, like a T-bone steak. That was like a huge deal at our house to grill a T-bone. And we were required to pick up that bone and gnaw everything off of it. We could not leave that table. And
That's
he
the
said,
best part.
"Oh yeah," but I do that now, and people look at me like I'm a Neanderthal. It's like, yep, my knuckles are dragging on the ground. It's like, oh my gosh, but it's so hard to teach that when we we don't even have to go out. We just like punch some stuff on a phone, and DoorDash or whoever will come to your door. You don't have to do anything anymore. It's right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Man, we have it
I
good
think
right
the
now.
interesting thing, though, is, and I've heard this from so many different readers from different cultures, that there's a lot of overlap in the immigrant experience, to the United States, to
Mm,
North America. And I loved hearing about the commonalities. I would get an email from an Indian reader or from,
mm.
as you said, you have an Irish background and, people from different countries in Europe, Asia, Africa, whatever. People would email me and tell me about how something I wrote about sparked a memory of theirs from childhood. And I just um, love the idea that writing and books can be bridges between cultures. I love that idea.
See, that's like the holy grail for writers, where you're making these connections and you're building super fans. It's like if Debbie writes another book, I'm buying it. No matter what it is, I'm gonna buy
Wait,
it.
I'm writing that down. You're going to sign that. I'm making you sign. That's going to be our contract.
Absolutely. I was on Facebook this morning, and a good friend of mine that's an author in St. Pete, Florida, Nathan Van Coops, he wrote his second book in a series. He's been writing forever. He's a very accomplished author. And he had a book release like thing going on Facebook. I bought the book and I barely know what it's about. But I like him and I'm a super fan, and his writing is awesome. And your book, like I said before, I can't wait to read the next one because your writing is amazing. So
Thank you.
you want that. I mean, like I said, that's the holy grail. When you have people unsolicited promoting your stuff, without you asking them, oh my God, that's amazing. Or them taking the time out of their day to email you about, hey, that sparked that memory for me.
I
Man,
love
that's
it.
that's gold.
Yeah, it is.
It
It's the
really is.
dream.
Yep, sure is. So one of the many gut punches in this book that got me emotional was the family tree story. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Could you kind of go over that?
Yeah, well, the family tree or the lack of the family tree. Yeah, when you are a child of Holocaust survivors, at least in my case, all I wanted was relatives. That's what I wanted more than anything. I wanted the aunts and uncles and cousins that I saw at the backyard birthday parties of my neighbors, the big family gatherings and the people that came out to watch the school play. And in my case, there were just five of us all together. My entire extended family was five people: my parents, my one brother, one surviving grandmother, and me. No
Wow.
aunts, no uncles, no cousins. And so that was a real theme of growing up, of being isolated, of feeling like, this little island of five people living in a sea of Canadians,
Hmm.
all who seemed to belong, and we didn't belong. And there were no relatives that sort of made us feel as if we were part of the fabric of society. It was just us. So
Wow. So, the family tree story, that was you. What, how old were you when you got that assignment to do a family tree
I think
in
I would have
school?
been 11. It was grade 6, if I remember.
Okay. And the story is, you have to you have to draw like a family tree, and you see all of your classmates with all these leaves and all these branches, and you only had a few.
Right, right.
Oh, man. I
And not
just,
only that, I couldn't remember the names of my dead relatives, my own
sure.
grandparents, my father's one sister, the other people in the family. I could never remember. And to this day, I have a really hard time remembering their names unless they're written in front of me. And that's a
Yeah.
thing I didn't realize until much later in life, that this is actually a very common symptom of Holocaust survivors' children and grandchildren, that they don't remember the names of dead relatives.
Oh, that
And
makes
I
sense.
didn't
Yeah.
know that my brother had the same trouble. We never really discussed it,
Right.
but apparently it's a thing for him too.
Wow. Something else. Now, who was the elevator operator? Wasn't there somebody that was an elevator operator?
That was my mom.
Oh,
She
that's
was a
right.
very, she was a very educated, a very, very intelligent woman. And she was on her way to becoming a vet. She was in veterinary university in Hungary. and didn't know very much English and came to Canada, came to Toronto, and became an elevator operator because that's what she could do.
That's amazing to me because that's what my grandpa did when he came to this country. And he came to this country and he was a butler for an English sergeant major, and they treated him like absolute garbage. He worked like
Mm.
16-hour days every day. They treated the Irish like horribly. My mom and her sister, because okay, he was a butler, his sister was a maid. They had houndsmen, footsmen, maids, nannies, butlers for just one family.
Wow.
And my mom and her sister were probably like 7, 8 years old. And if they were around the grounds, they weren't allowed inside the grounds. But if they were around there and a nanny was like pushing a buggy with the sergeant major's children inside, they'd have to stop what they're doing, bow and curtsy to the buggy.
To the buggy.
Yes, where the baby was inside. Yeah, it's like so. As you can imagine, yeah, America sounded pretty darn good.
Yeah.
So my grandpa went to America first for a year and worked like 2 or 3 jobs to save up enough money to send the rest of his family over. It was all, by boat. And he lived with his uncle, who was a New Jersey police captain. So when it was time to bring the family over, he had 2 job offers. One was an elevator operator downtown Chicago or a janitor on an Indian reservation in Arizona. Well, Irish people fry pretty easily. The sun, a desert is not a good place for an Irish guy. So Chicago, here we come. So but yeah, he did it for 25 years, and I don't know many people that have done that job.
Right.
But he
That's
got
really funny.
it was a big union building, and in Chicago, you join the union before you get a job. So if you're a plumber, an electrician, or whatever, you have to join the union first, and they find you a job. And he's like, so he went to the different unions in his building. They all knew him. And it's like, hey, I have a prospective son-in-law coming over from Ireland. Can you get a job? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. So my dad joined the dairy union. There was a
Yeah.
working dairy downtown Chicago, and that's how he got the job. So,
Right.
you're talking about like almost not fitting in at first, like when you were young. And again, that triggered something else in me. And it's like parents speaking with accents or different languages. Both my parents are immigrants. They both had thick accents. And I remember one time I had a buddy over at the house and he whispers to me, he said, what language is that your mom's speaking? And I'm like, English. it, you know, she'd be if I had a friend, I had a friend that was like thin, is just his build, and she would literally be chasing him around the house with a ham sandwich. Oh, have a sandwich, have a sandwich, and she was like dying inside that this kid didn't have enough to eat. I'm like, he's just thin, ma. I mean, how did that make you feel growing up?
That's hysterical. Um, well, so obviously I've matured since then, but also diversity wasn't a thing back
No,
then to
not at
be
all.
appreciated and to be celebrated. And so I very much wanted to fit in. And I started school not speaking English at all. I only spoke Hungarian.
Wow. Okay.
And I could read. I had this one particular book, I think it was my only book that I read at nighttime, and I could read the whole thing in Hungarian by the time I went to kindergarten. But the teachers were not particularly impressed with that because I couldn't speak
Right.
English. So, yeah, no, I was definitely embarrassed that my parents had these very thick accents, and I think the saving grace was when Green Acres came on television and Ava
Yes.
Gabor had this heavy
Oh
accent. I'm
yeah.
like, oh wow, it's the same.
It's cool.
It's cool. A movie star.
Oh my. Yeah, it's different. Yeah, and then like not to keep harping what my life was like, but I see a lot of similarities. They didn't understand the cultural stuff too. It's like, hey, like Steve that lives, behind us wants me over for a sleepover. And my mom's like, you have a bed here. No, ma, it's a sleepover. It's like, you have a bed here. Why would you sleep somewhere else? It just didn't compute, and it's like, did you ever have any like cultural problems that way?
Oh yeah. Well, in our case, it was the food. So my mother, well, so part of it was for economic reasons. Everything was made from scratch
Okay.
and prepared at home. So there was no such thing as going out for dinner or bringing in fast food. Um, and also, my parents had this real suspicion of everything they called quote unquote American food, even
Oh,
though we were
okay.
living in Canada.
Right.
So I remember the first time I tried McDonald's, I was 11, almost 12. That was the first time I tasted McDonald's, and I thought it was the best thing I'd ever had in my entire life. But no, but I remember that when I had friends over for dinner, they would look at the stuff on their plate, which was like some kind of goopy stew or something,
Yeah.
whatever was easy to make and affordable. Um, and they would go, they'd turn their nose up. And I remember the first time I had lunch at a friend's house, and the mother was making macaroni and cheese from a box. And I was absolutely fascinated. I was standing beside her, watching her pour these little pebbles from a box into a pot of boiling water, and I couldn't imagine what this was going to be. And then she, stirred it all up, and she took milk, which in our house was just an ingredient. You never drank milk
Oh, okay.
directly, and she was using this milk. And then she poured this orange baby powder on top. It was just so strange. So yeah, we had a lot of food issues. My brother's 11 years older than me, and there was one particular night I remember. It was a Saturday night, and I happened to be sitting in the kitchen, and he came in with his backpack, and he looked around very furtively to see if my parents were around, and they were not. And I remember him reaching into his backpack and pulling out this box, and then really quickly hiding it at the very back of the refrigerator. And I whispered, "Is it drugs?" And he said, "No, chow mein." And it was just a very sheltered kind of existence. My parents surrounded themselves with friends, almost all of whom had been in the Holocaust
Mm,
themselves, Hungarian speakers. So it was like a very insular kind of existence.
wow. To switch gears a little bit, you know, I always wonder, did you or your parents' faith go away or strengthen because of what they went through, what they endured? And the same thing with you. And what you got the aftermath, of hearing it and feeling what your parents went through. For some it would be, okay, now I'm an atheist. And for some of you, well, thank God, they survived.
Yeah.
So how did that work out with you and your parents?
So my dad had come from a little bit more of an observant background to begin with, and he kept that level of observance even after the Holocaust and after he came to Canada. My mother, who was a little bit more secular to begin with, was really angry with God
Yeah,
afterwards
I could totally
and
see
really
why.
wanted absolutely nothing to do with religion, rejected everything to do with it.
Yeah.
Um, and, was very defiant in serving ham with pineapple rings and stuff like that. And my dad would kind of look at it and go, well, why are we eating this? And yeah, she was very defiant about it. But you can't fault her for everything she went
No,
through.
not at all.
So it's very understandable to me. And interestingly, I read a quote, and it's not the first time I read it, but it just came across my desk recently again, that Rabbi Sachs from the United Kingdom had a very good point. He said, "Why are people asking where was God during the Holocaust? It's not the right question to be asking. Instead of asking where was God, we should be asking where was humanity?"
Mm, that's powerful. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it definitely makes you think, I've been around a lot of people that have been through life-changing experiences, and it seems like you either go one way or the other. And that's a tough thing to handle. And sometimes, time can be a healer as well.
Hmm.
And it kind of softens the blow and it gives you more time for reflection. And sometimes, not always, it kind of dulls the pain a little bit.
Yeah.
Wow. So, what what does it do to you when you hear about and you see all this anti-Semitic rhetoric that is so popular right now in our culture? And there's so much ignorance out there. And a great deal of this is on the grounds of quote unquote higher learning. It
Yeah.
makes my stomach turn.
Yeah. Mine too. Patrick, I think we could talk about this for the next 3 days straight.
Oh,
But as far as I'm concerned, it's the 1930s all over again.
oh, you know,
And I think social media has a huge role to play in
yes,
this. But I am just every day reeling from just the hypocrisy of this whole situation. The fact that people are out there supposedly marching for peace and, demanding a ceasefire, but at the same time, they're telling Jews to go back to the gas chambers and calling for violence against Jews and completely ignoring the fact of over 100 hostages being raped and murdered as they speak.
yes,
And, the deafening silence of the feminist organizations and in the face of all of the rapes and mutilations that Hamas perpetrated on October 7th. I mean, it's just mind-boggling, the silence in condemning Hamas,
you
you
know,
know, and the silence in demanding responsibility from Hamas and the Palestinians. It's just I don't know how to wrap my head around it, but I have yet to hear a single protest calling for Hamas to take responsibility, calling for Hamas to surrender, to return the hostages. The onus has only been on Israel to make every concession, and it has tried. It has offered multiple ceasefires,
yes, it
and
has.
every ceasefire was reneged and broken by Hamas, just as it was on October 6th.
Right.
I mean, the whole thing, how people can align themselves with a terrorist organization,
Yeah,
knowing what they did, that
and
they tied families together and burned them alive and beheaded babies and mutilated children and what they did to the women. It's just, ugh. And then
it's
the hypocrisy, of the world organizations, the UN and
oh,
UNRWA, and the fact that the Red Cross has not visited the hostages once, not once
I did
in
not know that.
not once in 8 months has the
Wow.
red, the celebrities at the Oscars with their red hand pins. And I can
Oh my
guarantee
God.
you, they don't even know what that refers to. They
No, they
don't even
don't.
know the symbolism of those red hand pins.
No, what drives me nuts is this part of our culture that's supposed to be so forgiving and peaceful and embracing diversity and this, that, and the other thing are completely backwards when it comes to this issue. Completely.
Yeah.
And
But but
I
we
have
know why. We know why. I mean, I'm sure a lot of the students who are protesting on campuses really do think that, I don't know what percentage we're talking about, but I think many of them think, okay, this is a cause that I can rally behind because I really want the best for people. But you have to dig a little deeper. Where is all of this coming from?
right.
And the answer is the money and the numbers.
Oh,
When you think of how many billions of dollars, I have to, again, I just was compiling numbers, but
mm,
Cornell by itself has received $2 billion in funding from Qatar, the UAE, Kuwait. They're just flooding American universities with billions of dollars, and all of that money goes to, radicalized faculty and
okay.
indoctrinating students.
Cut.
Cornell is where that associate professor, that guy, what's his name, Russell Rickford or whatever, called the Hamas attacks energizing and exhilarating.
Oh,
That's what he said. And then,
Then how
since,
can that person have a job still?
yeah, this is a
How?
very good question because
It's like that
where are
should
the
be
administrators? Where's
right.
the government cracking down on this?
There are some universities I will give kudos that have no time for any of this and crack down on it, but it seems like the most prestigious, you know, it seems like the most expensive, the most prestigious universities are the ones that are really promoting this. And it
Yeah.
just, again, it makes my stomach turn.
Well,
I have
again,
friends
they
that,
they know that Qatar has given almost $5 billion in funding and gifts. And, there's reciprocity expected with that
oh,
funding.
yeah, nothing is free in life, kids. Yeah,
No,
nothing.
nothing's free, but
Oh
the
my gosh.
administrators want to keep that money stream coming and probably pays their own salaries.
Right.
But
But,
but you're absolutely right. It's the top universities. It's Harvard and MIT and Yale and Carnegie Mellon. They've gotten billions, and Columbia,
well, and like you
it's
said
all
before,
indoctrination.
it is, but then you have these mindless actors or performers that people idolize because they can act. A lot of them are very uneducated, very ignorant, and
Yeah,
they just go with whatever their agent says. Hey, you got to be on this, team today. Okay, get on your soapbox. Here's your little speech. Even though they really don't even know what they're talking about. And
they
as far
don't,
as the universities go, I have friends that are working on university police departments, and they said a good chunk of these people that are out there causing the biggest problems aren't even students.
right?
They're literally trespassing on private ground,
Sure, they're
and they're
paid protesters.
yes, they are paid protesters. But
Yeah.
what now,
It's just
kid?
amazing. Nobody wonders where all the tents came from. Nobody wonders where all the professional signage came from. Who paid for all of this?
Right? It's nauseating. It really is. But ah, yeah, we like you said, we could talk about this for 3 days straight, probably. But
Yeah.
hopefully it's kind of calming down now. Well, it's summer, so school really isn't out. So that's part of it where it's not as big of a deal. So hopefully it won't come back with, fire in the fall. So we'll see.
Hmm. We'll
We'll see
see.
what happens. But I think the most disturbing thing to me with all of that is, especially on campuses, kids are easily nudged or pushed. They don't have the life experience yet. But the adults, the professors that are in on this, it's like, no, yeah, it, it just it drives me batty. It's just so wrong.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, let's get off that topic.
It's
Something cheery, like a murder. Uh, now,
exactly.
the murder that part of the crate is about. When he comes up for parole, can you or other family members speak and give arguments about why he should remain locked up?
I don't know that that's a possibility, but the victim's family has been speaking at every parole hearing.
Okay, good. But I mean, but in the same vein, you guys were victims too, especially your mom and dad. I mean, obviously not to the degree of losing a child, but
Yeah.
it's still a crime.
Yeah. I mean, but it's relative and it
Yeah.
depends. I don't know what the extent of the legal system
Okay.
is
All
for
right.
something like that, but
All right. So when you wrote this book, when you started writing The Crate, did you want the reader to walk away with a specific feeling or a theme?
well, the themes, yes, for sure. And I wanted readers to really the takeaway being how painful memories from the past can be dredged up and how trauma just sort of continues to ripple through a person's life and beyond a single person to a family and to a community. Um, and I wanted people to think about how man has this limitless capacity for evil,
Yeah.
which, unfortunately is very relevant today. Again, we're seeing that same theme. And just sort of highlight the difference between, or the similarities between evil on an individual level and evil on a societal level, which again, it's, very timely.
Yes. I think with a good piece of music, you you may not remember the lyrics or whatever, but you remember how it makes you feel.
Yeah,
A certain movie you're watching on TV or go to the theater and it's like, wow, I felt X, Y, or Z.
right.
And you're not always going to remember all the specifics of it, and you accomplished that with your book.
Thank
It
you.
it
Well,
did
what I
that.
really wanted, yeah, and the other thing I really wanted the reader to walk away with is a sense of the importance of advocating for victims and
Yes,
honoring them, honoring their stories, preserving their memories, which was definitely, the case for the murder victim, but also for my parents and
absolutely.
for all other survivors of the Holocaust and victims of the Holocaust.
Absolutely. So let's change gears a little bit here. What is your writing process? Are you a wake up at the crack of dawn, the roosters are crowing, or whatever is going on there, and you just hit the keyboard right away, or how does that look like?
No, well, first of all, okay, there are no roosters, but there were roosters in Greece, which was
Oh, cool.
amazing. I
Okay.
loved waking up to the sound of roosters. Um, no, I tend to shoot myself in the foot a little bit because when I wake up in the morning, I feel like I have to, straighten everything up, throw the laundry in, get the dishes cleared, and
Yep.
all I have to really control the environment, get everything orderly and ready. And then when I'm done with all of that, then I can sort of sit down and look at my computer. But
Okay.
it definitely takes time. So that
Yeah.
could be time I should be writing.
Well, do you have like a word count goal that you have every day or week
No,
or month?
no,
No?
no.
Okay.
Sometimes I really just hit a stride and I can, get a lot of words onto the page. And other times, days will go by and crickets.
Oh, wow. Okay. Now, are you a plotter or do you kind of fly by the seat of your pants?
So I am a failed plotter, with The Crate, with my next book, A Nest of Snakes, with the third book and all other book starts in between. I went out, I'd buy a big piece of Bristol board or poster board, I think you
Yeah.
call it here, and do it these note like
Yeah,
notepads
sticky.
and I'd
Yeah, the sticky
fill
notes. Yeah.
sticky pad, whatever. Um, I would write all kinds of notes and outlines and chapter ideas and everything else and fill up this board in front of me. And then invariably the characters would kind of detour off the path that I
Mm.
had for them. And things would just kind of take on a life of their own, and the characters would do things I wasn't expecting.
Yeah. But you know what, though? I think that's a part of the creative process. I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think that it can be a good thing. And if it
Yeah, I
works for
mean,
you, hey, it worked. You came out
right.
with some great books. So, hey, it worked. So,
So far it worked.
do you use like a specific writing software like Scrivener or anything like
Nope,
that? Just
nope, just Word,
Microsoft Word? Okay.
just Word.
See, it doesn't have to be complicated, right? It
A
just doesn't.
pen and
Yeah.
paper.
Do you do any writing like with a notepad or anything like that?
I mean, I'll scribble down ideas and
Oh, okay.
potential character. I keep a note in my phone just of character names for the future.
Oh,
If I hear
cool.
a name
Okay.
that sounds really cool, I'll keep a list of potential names, but
I
that's
like
really it.
that. That's a great idea because it's like I'll be at the gym or I'll be at the grocery store, I'll be something like that. I was like, oh, my character should be doing something like that. It's like so I scribble it down on my phone right away. It's like, okay. Or you wake up in the morning and it's like, ooh, if you're lucky enough, you might have a dream about your character or your
Hmm.
story. And it's like, oh my God, I gotta write this down before I forget it.
Yeah,
So
a
that's
phone's good
awesome.
for that.
Yes. So let's look into the future here. What's next for you?
So as I said, I have this wonderful new agent who now has my third manuscript with her, and we've been doing a little bit of editing back and forth. And when she feels it's ready, she'll send it out on submission, and
Ooh.
then we'll see. Hopefully, it'll get
Um, I don't know how much you
picked
can
up.
tell us about the third book, but Is it well, yeah, how much can you tell us about it?
So it's a thriller, but it's supposed to be funny. It's a comedic thriller.
Oh, cool.
I had a blast writing it. You know, the first two books are pretty heavy, right?
Yes, yes.
Very heavy. And I really just wanted a bit of a departure from that.
Yeah,
So I was
absolutely.
trying to write, you know, something light and you know, like a caper gone wrong. So that's
Mhm.
what the third book is.
Outstanding. Do you have can you say what the title is yet or not?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you the title that she and I both agree we like, but that doesn't mean the publisher will keep it. But right
Yeah.
now it's called A Nice Deal.
A nice deal. Excellent. Very good. And you know what? It's hard to write comedy. That's not easy. Most people who gravitate towards comedy are some of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. Like,
Uh-oh.
stand-up comedians or, comedians in general, I think are some of the smartest people ever. They might dumb it down for their shtick, for their act, but some of them are some of the most intelligent people you'll ever meet. And writing comedy, that's no joke. Yeah, pun intended. It's tough.
But
So kudos to you. That's great.
well, my family says there's no way it's funny,
Oh, oh
but
no.
we'll see.
All right. All right.
We
So
shall see.
I met you with the crime trio with Wendy and Pat. Can you tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about that?
Yeah, so we've branded ourselves the crime trio, and we talk about how crimes have either appeared in our writing or influenced our writing, and we've been doing a lot of events and podcasts, and Wendy and I will be on a panel this coming Saturday, so
Where's
it's
that going to
great. You
be?
know, it's a great collaboration
Where's the panel going to be?
in Stamford, Connecticut,
Okay.
Crime Con.
CrimeCon. Oh, that's right. CrimeCon's going on. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Is that going to be like, is there access for us who are not at CrimeCon, do you know? Or,
Virtual?
yeah.
I don't know. I can
Okay.
find out for you.
All right. All right. Very cool. Now, am I dreaming this or were you guys kicking around the idea of having your own podcast?
I well, we talk about things, you
Mm-hmm.
know. We chat, we toss around ideas, so you never know.
Okay. Well, I think that would be really cool because I like the chemistry with the three of you. I think it works really well. And you guys kind of feed off of each other. And I think that'd be a really neat thing.
Yeah, it's a possibility for sure.
Okay. But all right. All right. You know what? This is a good place for us to close here. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Debbie. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. Where can people go to learn more about you and your books?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me again, and thank you so much for reading the book. That really, I'm so glad it resonated with you, and I'm
Oh, it
so
did on so
grateful
many
that you
different
read it.
levels. Yeah, I mean, I'm an Irish Catholic kid from Chicago, and I absolutely love that book. So, that's yeah, I can't say enough good things about it.
Thank you. So yeah, people should come visit me on my website, which is debbielevison.com, and it's DebbieLevison. There's no N in the middle. It's
Yeah,
not Levinson. Everybody does
I made that
that. It's
mistake before, but
Levison.
that's right. I made sure I did it right.
DebbieLevison.com.
All right. Well, thanks again, Debbie, for being on the show and everything you do.
Oh, thanks again for having me.